Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 450. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode for the first time in what feels like a really long time. I know that my last solo episode was 445, but actually I recorded that the end of last year or the beginning of January before my trip to the States. So it really has been a long time since I sat down and recorded something for you. So this episode, I'm talking about adventures in endurance. But before we get into this topic, I wanted to quickly mention a podcast I was recently a guest on, the Read and Write podcast. I spoke with the host about my favorite productivity hack, which is workations. Now, it's actually been a couple of months since I did a workation, but it's been something that I've been doing just about every month for the last 5 or 6 years. And it's how I've written so many books and completed so many creative projects. And it's one of my favorite things to do. So if you want to learn more about workations and how you can get creative projects done in record time and really enjoy the process and just kind of do a deep dive into the work, head over to hollyworton.com/read and write, and that will redirect to the podcast. So what am I going to talk about today? You are going to learn what is endurance, including the 3 types of endurance. I discuss the lifestyle benefits of endurance, the physical benefits of endurance, and the mental and emotional benefits of endurance. Finally, I talk about how to get the mindset you need for your endurance events. So this is something that's been on my mind for a while now. It's something I've been thinking about for, a couple months. And I've had this topic on my list of things to talk to you about for at least as long. So I've started reflecting on my black belt grading, which I haven't confirmed yet with my instructor, but I'm planning to do it on the summer course, which is usually the last week of June or the first weekend in July. And it's going to be a year and a half since I did an advanced grading, and it's going to be 2 years since I did a normal advanced grading, or maybe even 2.5 years. So it's been a while since I've done this. And the last couple, 2, 3, 4 advanced gradings that I did were well before my adventures in ultra running and endurance sports. And so I'm realizing that I viewed these advanced gradings from a completely different perspective. I kind of saw them as like this necessary evil, this thing that I had to suffer through just to get to the next level in kickboxing or to get the new belt. I never really thought of it as something that I might enjoy. I was always super proud of myself for surviving the weekend and for passing the grading and for getting to the next level. And I was really proud of myself for the result. But during the advanced grading, I just suffered through it. It was like, I can barely move on. I can barely get through this. And it was like every time we had like a 30-second water break, I would go and grab my water bottle and drink and just think, oh God, I don't think I can do this. And then I would just get myself out there and keep going. But it was like this thing that I suffered in my head. And of course, it is something that's really challenging. It is. I think it's challenging for everyone, even the people that are younger than I am or in better shape than I am or whatever. Like, it's not just me. Like, it's challenging for everyone. But I saw that challenge as a negative thing rather than embracing it and seeing it as a positive thing. So because I am training now for the one race that I've signed up for this year, which is in August, and because I'm back into doing kickboxing training in preparation for my grading and just general kickboxing stuff, I've started reflecting on these 2 types of events because they really are kind of endurance events. The advanced kickboxing gradings aren't just show up, do the line work, do some sparring, and that's it. It's 13 hours spread over 2 days, which I look at it from a running perspective. It's obviously a much more intense physical effort than endurance running, but it's a lot less hours and it's spread over 2 days. I don't know. I've just got a whole new perspective on this. So I thought it would be a useful kind of conversation to have with you and ask you some questions and get you reflecting on this for you and your life to see if, I don't know, maybe it might shift your perspective as well. Because I feel like I'm kind of starting to get to a good place in terms of my mindset. And I think this is a really good shift. So I want to share this with you. So before I get into the conversation, what is endurance? So there are a couple of definitions. 1, the ability to endure an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. It sounds terrible. 2, the capacity of something to last or to withstand wear and tear. 3, denoting or relating to a race or other sporting event that takes place over a long distance or otherwise demands great physical stamina. That's what we're talking about. But I find it really interesting that the first definition of endurance was the ability to endure an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving up. And I think that's kind of how I've approached the kickboxing gradings. You know, it's an unpleasant, difficult thing that I just have to get through, and then it gets over, and then I have the new belt. Whereas I haven't approached running events in that way. Like, I've approached running events as this thing that, like, it's, you know, a beautiful day on the trails. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's challenging, but I like being outdoors on the trails. So why would I not enjoy most of the event, even though it's challenging? And that's also led me thinking about how I view kickboxing. Like, why am I doing it? Do I still enjoy it? Yes. But it's these kind of intense grading events that, I don't know, I never looked at them before as something to be enjoyed. So what are the different types of endurance? I'm not going to get into this, but I just wanted to mention aerobic endurance, anaerobic endurance, speed endurance, and strength endurance. So you can look into those if you want to, but I just thought that was useful to kind of bring up the fact that there are different types of endurance. So what are the lifestyle benefits of endurance sports and endurance events? One of them, I think, is improved work-life balance, because it does take a considerable amount of time to train for these things. It's been a challenging year so far. I've been really busy. I've had a couple of big projects to work on, but in theory, I'm running 3 days a week and doing kickboxing 3 days a week. That hasn't fully panned out yet, but I've been doing 2 or 3 days of each week. Like I said, it does require you to be mindful about your schedule, to plan your training, and to get that in the calendar. And in getting that into the calendar, that means that I have to be really mindful about how long I work. You know, last week I had a deadline for something. I really needed to finish it Thursday evening. I was hoping to go to class, but I just didn't finish the article that I was writing until after the time I needed to leave for class, so I didn't make it to class. But this is something that I will be working on in the future, and it is something that's making me aware of how I balance my work and my training. It can also provide you with a social network. So running for me is very solitary. I do go on runs with my husband occasionally, but I prefer to run either alone or with him. I don't have a running club. I have zero desire to join a running club, and I have no desire to run with anyone other than my husband. So there we go. That's me being antisocial with my running. But kickboxing is a very social thing, and I don't know a lot of local people in my area. Most of my friends are online friends, and so we meet on Zoom and hang out that way. But doing kickboxing has provided me with a social network of people in my local area. I've met so many people over the last 7 years, I think, that I've been doing kickboxing almost, of people that, you know, I occasionally see around town. And it's just nice to know people in real life. And for people, of course, who are more social with their running or hiking or walking, it can provide you with that network, which is really, really important, especially in these still weird times. It can provide structure or routine to your day. So I know for some people who, whether you're self-employed or you have a job, it might be difficult sometimes to find a structure or a routine that works for you, but having that training, which is so necessary for endurance sports, because you can't just rock up on the day and be like, hey, I'm ready to walk 100 miles or run 100K or whatever. Like, you just can't do that. You need to plan in advance. And having that planning gives you some structure or routine for your day. Finally, it can be good to inspire others, whether that's family members, friends, colleagues, just people in your life. That's one of the reasons that I write the books that I write about walking and outdoor adventures. It's part of the reason I have this podcast is because getting outdoors and doing these kinds of things has been so beneficial to me. And I want to inspire other people to do the same and see if it's beneficial to them. So you can inspire others with your endurance events. What are the physical benefits of endurance sports or endurance events? Improved sleep is one of them. I know when I have a long run or a long day out in the trails or, one of my advanced kickboxing gradings, I sleep really, really well. Same goes when I do walk one of my long distance trails. I'm usually really tired and I sleep like a really deep quality sleep at night, which is great. So that's a great physical benefit. Sleep is really good, and sleep is, of course, necessary for recovery. Studies have shown that endurance training can also boost your metabolism, which is also good if you have issues with your metabolism, such as I do. I've got an underactive thyroid, and that's not fun. So, hey, anything helps. It can also, of course, improve your fitness levels because you're training for this big event, and it can also improve your energy levels. I definitely feel like running has helped with my energy levels. It just really makes me feel good. I mean, there's some times where I just drag myself out of the house to go for a run. Really don't want to, but I need to because it's in the schedule. I need to do my training, and I feel great afterwards. The same goes for kickboxing. There's sometimes I don't feel like going to class. I don't like exercising in the evenings, and that's when classes are, but I drag myself out of the house again. I go and I feel much better. So it can really boost your overall health, wellness, and energy levels, which is always good. So, mental emotional benefits. And I think this to me is kind of one of the most interesting parts of this. Because you're doing so much training for these events, it does, of course, reduce stress. You probably will be getting outdoors for some of your endurance training. So if you're doing like trail running or hiking or that kind of thing, you'll be outdoors for that. And that also helps reduce stress and just mental well-being. Training for these events can also improve your mental strength and your resilience. And that's for obvious reasons. You're going to be pushing yourself for longer runs, longer hikes, longer walks, or whatever it is that you're training for. And that's going to expand your perspective of what you think is possible for you, what you think you can do, what you think you're capable of. And it just makes you realize that you're capable of so much more than you might think. It can also improve your body positivity and your self-image and self-esteem. And I've talked about that in an episode that I will link to in the show notes, where I talked about how, I've not been happy with my body for the last few years because I've really struggled with my weight for the last 12 years. And getting back into running, and especially these endurance events, has really helped me to stop focusing on how my body looks and start focusing on what my body can do for me, like where it can take me, and, all the beautiful trails that I run on and that kind of thing. It's really improved my self-esteem, just the way I see my body. Like I've stopped being pissed off at it for not looking the way I want it to, and I've started just being proud of it for what it can do. It can also improve your moods. It can improve peace of mind. And there have been scientific studies on this. Exercise, of course, helps with improving moods. Clear thinking. There have also been studies shown that exercise, and particularly endurance training, has been shown to improve cognitive function, and it can even help prevent Alzheimer's in older athletes. Training for endurance events can also improve our problem-solving skills. So stuff comes up when we're training, and we learn how to solve those problems. We know when we're out on the trail or whatever. Also, goal setting. When you're training for something big like this, you're setting goals, you're doing things to achieve them. And that also helps improve problem-solving skills. And finally, and I kind of touched on this earlier, it promotes resilience. Because when you're training for something big and you're doing the big thing, whether that's an event or an exam or a grading or whatever, as you get through that and as you see the challenges come up and you push through them and you move on, it just promotes resilience, not just in that sport or in that event, but in all areas of your life. And, sometimes we need resilience. A lot of times we need resilience. So all of this leads me to the question, how do you get the mindset you need for endurance events? And this is what I've been reflecting on. So I think it all starts with knowing your why. And I've talked about this before in an episode that I will link to in the show notes. But know your why. What are you training for and why is it important to you? So I've got the two big things this year. I've got the North Downs Way 100 in August. and I've got my kickboxing grading in, hopefully, the summer. So that's what I'm training for. Why is it important to me? So running is important to me, the North Downs Way, because North Downs Way is a trail that I love. It's a trail that I run on all the time. It's just an emotionally meaningful trail to me because it's kind of in my backyard. And that distance is meaningful to me because in 2015, I walked the South Downs Way for the first time, and I did it over the course of a week, and it was just really hard and really challenging. And, I walked it again, and it was 2019, and it was a completely different experience. So I just really want to do that distance in one day and see what that's like. I'm just curious. And that's kind of one of the things that's really fueled my endurance running. Like, can I do this big thing? And so far, yes, I can. So we'll see. So that's why I'm doing that. For kickboxing, it's the next step in my kickboxing. I've been doing this thing for almost 7 years, and it's the next step. And it's been my goal ever since I started. And it's exciting to be at this point where I might finally be able to do my grading. So that's what I'm training for, and that's why it's important to me. So think about you. Like, what is your why? What is the thing that you're training for, and why is that so important for you? And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as the challenges come up. Just remind yourself of why it's still important to you. And is it still important to you? Because, of course, our priorities change, our goals change, and it's totally fine for you to get to a point in your training and be like, you know what? Other things are going on in my life, and this thing that I thought was important, because it was important, is no longer important. So you can either shelve it and come back to it next year or in the future, or just forget about it and find something else that's more important. So remember that. Know your why, but also check in with that why and make sure that your why is still important to you. So one thing that I think is important to keep in mind, and this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Psychological toughness is built on a platform of physical fitness. So you've got to train for these big endurance events because no matter how tough you are psychologically and mentally, and no matter how great your mindset is, you've got to be able to do it physically. So these two things go hand in hand. I really think, I talk about mindset work, and I used to talk about this a lot in terms of business, taking the 2 steps. Step 1 is practical action. Step 2 is mindset work. Practical action, mindset work, like they go hand in hand, and they're both part of the journey. So that's why I'm constantly working on my mindset, not just with sports and endurance stuff, but with business and life in general. Obviously, training is part of it. So as you train longer distances, stuff will come up for you, and you can troubleshoot, and you can problem solve, and you can look at the fears, blocks, and limiting beliefs and stuff that's coming up for you and work on those mindset issues before they become a problem in the big event. Also, train in tough conditions. So if you're training for an outdoor event like running or hiking or cycling, don't just be a fair weather walker, runner, cyclist. Like train in the mud, train in the rain, train in the heat. I hate heat. If you've read any of my walking books, you will know how much I hate heat. I really don't like heat. And I'm running a race in August. And there's a big possibility that the weather is going to be really hot. Well, really hot by English standards, which is hot for me because I don't like heat. I have really low tolerance for heat. So last year's event, when my husband ran this race, it was terrible. It was pouring rain. It was mud. And that led to a lot of DNFs for people. A lot of people did not finish that race because the conditions were just miserable because they were wet and muddy. But they could be miserable in the sense of super hot and sunny. So if you train in these conditions, then you'll be better able to take them on when you're in the actual event. Also, show up for your training. When you commit to yourself that you're going to do a training plan, that will help get you the mindset you need for your endurance events because you will have the mindset that you are committed to this event and that you are committed to finishing the event. And as I said, pay attention to your thoughts and feelings when you're training, like what's coming up for you, what's going on, what are you afraid of, and that will help you know what aspects of your mindset you need to work on. As always with everything else, keep your eye on your own lane. So not just during the event, but in your training. Like focus on you, focus on your performance, focus on your training, and forget about the fact that there are people out there who are bigger, better, faster, stronger, whatever. And I'm doing that with air quotes than you. Like, do your own thing, have your own plan, stick to your plan, but focus on you and improving your training and your mindset and getting you ready for this event. Forget about everyone else. Except, of course, during the race, if you're planning to compete and win the race or aiming to win the race, then yes, obviously pay attention to where you are in relation to other people. When I was doing a bit of research for this episode, I came across this, and I'm going to link to the article in the show notes. Athletes who cope successfully with endurance performance tend to feel fatigue and happiness simultaneously, whereas athletes who do not cope very well tend to feel fatigued and depressed and angry at the same time. And I found this really, really interesting. So in my 100K race last year, I was fatigued because it was a very challenging race. It took me a long time to do it, but I was so happy all day. And that was really interesting. That's something that I hadn't kind of thought about until I read this article, that I was able to feel fatigue and happiness at the same time. And apparently that's really, really important in helping you cope successfully with endurance events. So as you extend your training and as you do bigger, harder things, pay attention to all the emotions that you're feeling. How do you feel when you get fatigued? Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Are you depressed? Are you like, I just want this to be over with? Or can you allow yourself to feel fatigue and happiness at the same time? This is something that I think I'm actually going to work on and actually do a little bit of mindset work on and see how I can approach that. And I will let you know how it goes. I found that really, really, really interesting comparison. So again, as you're training, as you're preparing for the event, see what fears, blocks, and limiting beliefs come up for you and do the mindset work to shift that. So what do I mean by doing the mindset work? I trained 9 years ago, in a thing called PSYCH-K, which is a technique which helps you transform limiting beliefs into enhancing beliefs at the subconscious level. I've also done a lot of work with an NLP practitioner who has been a guest on this podcast, and I will link to her in the show notes. She's been really fantastic in helping me with sports mindset. It's using techniques that work at the subconscious level to shift your fears, shift your blocks, shift your limiting beliefs into enhancing beliefs that support you and your goals. That's what I mean by mindset work. Next, you can focus on the concept of the dip. So moods can go up and down, but in an endurance event, they're probably not going to just spiral down into disaster. They go up and down. It's like when you're doing intermittent fasting and your stomach starts growling. You don't just get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier and then you just explode. It goes up and down. So if things get bad for you, just start thinking, I'm in a dip now. I just need to get through it. Things are going to get up. They're going to go better. And keep going through the low points. So last year about this time was when I ran my first 42K, which is the marathon distance, on my own with my husband crewing for me. It was kind of a homemade event that was part of my training. And I got halfway through it and I wanted to quit. And he got me through it. He got me back on the trails. He supported me in finishing it. It was a huge, huge success for me physically and also mentally and emotionally, because I realized I felt like crap. All I wanted was to quit, and I got through it and I finished my goal. That was just very, very useful to me in terms of learning how my mind works and learning what I'm capable of, even though I don't want to do the thing in the moment. It changed, and I was so proud of myself. So just keep going through the low points because it will go up at some point. Have a mantra. So that was one thing that I learned from working with Jane Talbot, my NLP practitioner that's helped me with my sports mindset. She recommends having a mantra this is what it takes. So when I'm doing my training and I feel I don't feel like doing this, and I start feeling sorry for myself and it's that internal voice that just wants me to quit, I just say to myself, this is what it takes. This is what it takes for me to be able to do the big event that I want to do. This is what it takes. I've got to put in the miles. I've got to do the training. This is what it takes. So find something that works for you and just repeat it to yourself. And that can often get you out of that low point. Also, if you're having an actual problem that needs to be solved, focus on what you can do to change the current situation. What can you control? Oftentimes, the things that get you out of a low point are very simple. Food and water. or hydration, so electrolytes. Eat some food. Like whenever you're on a training thing, run, walk, whatever, or when you're in the event and you feel like crap and you're feeling low, force yourself to eat something, unless you're sick, and force yourself to drink something or get some electrolytes. Those two things can often really help. So a lot of times we're feeling poor mentally because physically we need sustenance. We need hydration. So focus on what you can do to change the situation. You can shove some food in your mouth. You can get some water down your throat. If you have blisters, you can pause to fix those blisters. You can change your socks if you have a spare pair of socks. You can add some powder to your socks. You can tape your feet. There are so many things you can do to troubleshoot if you're having a physical problem, and that can make a big, big difference in your mindset, both on your training and during the event. Next, you can just learn to embrace the discomfort because it's just part of the process. There are going to be high points. There are going to be low points. It's going to be difficult because it's a challenge. It's just part of the process. And I think this is going to be a big game changer for me with my mindset in terms of kickboxing grading, because instead of suffering discomfort, I'm going to work on embracing it because it is part of the process. Next, visualize success. And this is something that doesn't take a lot of time. I think about this all the time. I visualize myself like doing the kickboxing grading. I visualize myself receiving my black belt after the grading results come in. I visualize myself running the North Downs Way 100. I visualize myself crossing the finish line. I visualize these kind of parts of the process and the final achievement. And it's just a few seconds, but every once in a while, like when I think about the event, I think, oh, it's going to be like that. And I just spent a couple of seconds like imagining myself running or doing the thing, and it all adds up, really. It doesn't need to be like a half an hour's like focused visualization of the event. It's just little bits along the way, and I think it does really help. Finally, get help when needed. So as I said, I've trained in PSYCH-K. I do sessions with myself, occasionally do sessions with other people, but mostly with myself. And when I need help, I work with someone. Either another PSYCH-K facilitator, or I work with Jane Talbot, whom I will link to in the show notes, for NLP. She's really great at doing NLP for sports mindset. So that's that. Those are my thoughts on endurance and how to get the mindset you need to do the endurance events that you want to do. Please let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com or find me online and get in touch. I really like having feedback from listeners about these topics. I find it really useful. So let me know what you think, and let me know if you have any ideas for topics that you might want to hear about. So that's all for now. Next week, I'm back with another exciting guest. I will be talking with Dr. Andrea Perez about rest and recovery and how to balance adventure and recovery. So again, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And please remember to visit hollyworton.com/450. That's 450 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.